Hello everyone and welcome to another mage video. In today's video I'm going to be looking at the Frost Mage and the Ineffable Truth corruption. Now that we can purchase through echoes different corruptions at Mother, I've been testing out some different builds, and today I'm going to look at Ineffable Truth with Frost, and I'll probably have another few videos doing it with Arcane and Fire, just trying to think through some of the potential that's in these specs. So Ineffable Truth is a buff that a player can receive in combat that will reduce the cooldown recovery of your spells by 30% for rank 1 and 50% for rank 2, and that's for about a 10 second window. So the benefit for what I'm going to show you today is that we're trying to do a Frozen Orb build where we cast as many Frozen Orbs as we can and fire off Ice Lances during that window. Traditionally, this is not really the build that's played. More often we have the Glacial Spike build, which seeks to launch and cleave with humongous, massively powered, mastery pushed glacial spikes. In this case, what we're trying to do is maximize resets. And the beauty of this is there's a lot of synergy in Frost Mages for resetting the cooldown of your abilities. The first thing to note, and the most important one, is that Blizzard, when it ticks on a target, will reduce the cooldown of Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb, of course, is our main source of damage, and the window it produces is where we get all of our damage, so we want to be focused on Blizzard hitting as many targets as we possibly can. What Ineffable Truth will do is help to cool down both Frozen Orb and Blizzard. So that helps us to double dip a little bit, because as Blizzard's cooldown comes down around the 1 to 2 second mark, we can produce quite a few instances of Blizzard and therefore have, depending on how many mobs we're hitting, Arcane Orb resetting very, very fast. So you'll see as I do the demo, when we're in the ineffable window, I think Blizzard comes down to basically a GCD, and you'll see the Frozen Orb tick around really fast. So we're coupling and pairing this with Vision of Perfection to try to keep our Haste very high, because Haste also naturally reduces the GCD of Blizzard and Frozen Orb. And we're also going to take a couple of interesting traits. First is Thermal Void in order to extend our Icy Veins, so keep the Haste proc around. We're going to be starting with one of the two builds I'm recommending here, Bone Chilling and Freezing Rain, to maximize our Blizzard damage, rather than Lonely Winter and Splitting Ice, which is probably a little bit better, but focuses more on our Ice Lance damage specifically. And the reason why I'm showing you two versions is that our GCD gets locked up pretty tight when we have Ineffable Truth proc, and therefore we have to make decisions between often casting back-to-back Blizzards or firing off Ice Lances. And so it's interesting. This one focuses more on spamming out the Blizzards during those windows. The other one would probably suggest to try to keep as much Ice Lance as you can. So you will chew up a few of your procs in this build. The second thing I want to point out is related to our traits. So obviously you want to have 3 packed ice, but the most important one I think actually has to do with, outside of these 3, is Whiteout. And the reason for this is it basically allows us to avoid casting Frostbolt at all, and we can fill in our rotation by just pressing Ice Lance. So this will actually partly ensure that we don't miss any procs, because we're naturally going to be filling all of our GCDs that we're not using for Blizzard or Frozen Orb on Ice Lance, and sometimes you get procs right when you're in the middle of casting and you don't have a chance in Frost to get it off and it gets chewed up. But Whiteout allows us to have an active role in reducing Frozen Orb's cooldown. So I'm just going to do a basic rotation here for a second until I can get a couple of Ineffable Truth procs, just to show you what the first version of this build looks like. And again, I think this is a really good one for Mythic Plus or some of the later fights in Nyalotha where there's lots of cleave and especially lots of targets. So we'll open with a Rune of Power into Frozen Orb, get our free cast Blizzard going, and then pop our CD and see how many we get. So you can already see with how much haste we have a 3-second cooldown on our Blizzard. Here's Ineffable. You can see here we go. We're starting to get basically on GCD blizzards. So every GCD is a blizzard during the ineffable window. And we're punching out a lot of frozen orbs as a result of this. You can see the cooldown comes around really fast, and we're just filling by casting Ice Lances. We don't have any time to cast Frostbolt. We're just pressing this button as much as possible to reduce our Frozen Orb. This is a general playstyle. Again, you're going to get vision procs like I did there to keep things going. But the beauty of filling with Ice Lances is, again, you naturally are helping to buff your build to keep your major cooldown on, to lower the CD of your Frozen Orb, and you don't have to worry about casting. You can move and cast. Here's another Ineffable Truth proc. So we have basically a really low CD on this. This is outside of a haste window, so it's still about 2 seconds. And again, that just ensures that we basically have Blizzard lowered to around 3 or less seconds for a large majority of the encounter. We're using double haste trinkets, Vita and Humming, the Dragon Scale, in order to try to keep a smooth rendition of this. Again, I can move around. You could do this without Arcane, Rune of Power. You could do this with Incanter's Flow, but I think Arcane Power probably gives you the most bang for your buck. Again, we have just on CD blizzards. It's basically at the GCD, and I can pop my CD again, which has come back around Icy Veins. There, and that gives you a little bit of a picture of what's going on. So that's the version that focuses more on Frozen Orb and Blizzard damage. Ice Lance is up there as well, but now I just want to show you the one that leans a little bit more into the Cleave side of it. This, I think, is probably more desirable in the end, but the downside is that you have to manually cast each of your blizzards. So during the ineffable window, instead of having the ability to make it an instant cast Freezing Rain, which basically, as you saw there, almost, I think every blizzard I cast during that little test was instant cast, because we have the Frozen Orb up for about 100% of the time. In the Splitting Ice one, you're going to have to manually cast Blizzard, and I found this a little bit clunky, but I think on the whole it probably does a bit more damage. So again, I'll just run it back, and you can see we'll just do it without CDs. I'm going to cast Blizzard first this time. Again, we're not casting any Frostbolts at all. I'm going to save this Rune of Power until we get something. We're still getting the same kind of cooldown reduction, and we're getting our Frozen Orbs out. We're still valuing casting Blizzards a lot, but we should get a lot more Cleave damage from... Here it comes. So big cooldown reduction here, but I had to cast that. Here comes another one. Now we can drop a Rune of Power. Another one. Again, this CD reduction is great from Ineffable because it's hitting all of our major abilities all together as a unit. And it just allows us to completely avoid casting our main ability, Frostbolt, which I think is crazy. You can see here the damage profile is a little bit better, at least on this pull. We did get a couple Ineffables right away, but we were also extending our Icy Veins by an insane amount, and we're pushing 150k on a target dummy. That's why I said I think I recommend probably doing the Cleave side of it, though you have to be aware that you'll be casting Blizzard manually as a result. Notice here in our window, we got another window here, so we can probably keep our buff up. We have the Frozen Orb buff almost permanently, which is just remarkable, considering that it's the sort of thing that in a normal Frost Mage build is a throwaway skill, and we're not really too worried about it due to Glacial Spike being the focus. Anyways, that guys gives you a little bit of a flavor of what I'm looking at. The question that's probably on your minds is this really viable? Is this too much corruption? What's going on here? So let me just talk about that as I close off the video. So I think for 9,900 echoes, you can get your 3 ineffables. I think going beyond 3 ineffables probably isn't necessary for this kind of a build. You'll also have to think about trying to get as many either haste procs or perhaps haste percentage, so that's competing I think a little bit. But you want haste procs because you're trying to flatten out over the course of a whole fight as many buffs that you can stack together as you can. And haste as a proc is really valuable because it just increases our blizzard's speed by quite a lot. You will find if you have a couple of high haste pieces that getting more haste percentage is also insanely good. So I don't have enough like 12% haste pieces to really show you, but I think that might also be a really great option, because when you hit your Vision of Perfection procs, you're just getting that much more haste out of this build. And haste is the king here. It lowers our GCDs, gives us more Frozen Orbs, gives us more Blizzards. It's really just excellent. You, of course, have to have 3 copies of Packed Ice in your Azurite traits. You really need Whiteout to make use of the extra CD so that you don't really have to cast Frost Bolts. One thing I will say, for a spec that is really busy, that is Frost is casting and thinking about many things within a short window for the entirety of a fight instead of during a big CD like Combustion or Arcane Power, it's actually fairly important that we don't have to cast Frostbolt in these scenarios. You will fill with it once, when you're on one target or so, but in the heat of an AoE situation, you're not trying to make that decision of, oh, should I be casting a Blizzard? Should I be waiting a GCD? Should I be, what should I be doing? You don't ever feel bad casting Ice Lance, just a naked Ice Lance. It feels great because you know you're cooling down your major abilities already.